We start tonight with a push to make our state ferries greener. In July, Governor Bob Ferguson announced the state will award a $715 million contract to a Florida company to make 3 new hybrid electric ferries for the state's evolving ferry fleet. But new reporting by the Washington Standard says the choice comes with a slower timeline. To learn more about this story, let's bring in reporter Tom Bonsi. Tom, thank you for joining us.
Happy to be with you.
To start, state officials picked a Florida company instead of a shipbuilder in our state. Why did they choose to go out of state?
Well, at the time, and there was a celebration this summer that the state finally is getting around to updating its aging ferry fleet. The choice seemed to be, money versus local jobs. And the 2 bidders, one was local, Nichols Brothers in Everett and Whidbey Island, or Eastern Shipbuilding out of the Florida Panhandle. The Panhandle shipyard was so much cheaper, and that's your and my money that we're spending on this. So the governor said, he would have liked to send the work, keep the dollars at home, but it was just no question when the out-of-state bid was hundreds of millions of dollars cheaper.
And timeline was also a big part of this. So when our state solicited bids for these ferries, they said they want the first boat to be here by 2029. Your reporting reveals the timeline has changed.
Yeah, there was an extra dimension that we are only finding out about now, about the choice between the 2 shipyards and the 2 bids. The Nichols Brothers bid said it would meet the specifications in the states going out to bid to have the first ferry delivered in 4 years and then another ferry each year after that. The Florida shipyard, for reasons which were not quite clear, put in their low bid but said, we'd like an extra year. And that fact was on the table, not really publicized at the time when the governor made the final call to go with the Florida shipyard. So now we're looking at 5 long years before the first relief comes in the form of new ferries for the stretched ferry system we have.
So it's been stated these ferries will not arrive all at the same time. When will all 3 ships be here in Washington state?
They're going to build one at a time, and so the first one comes in, if it comes on time, in August 2030, and then 2031 in August for the next one, and 2032 for the third one. Eventually, there probably will be, if this goes well, to use this Florida shipyard follow-on orders, because the state eventually wants 16 new ferries by about 2040.
So there's also a hurricane provision in the contract with this Florida shipbuilder. Is that common practice in this industry? And do you think more delays are expected?
I don't know. We have never had to deal with this for Washington Ferries acquisition. The first time we've, in more than 50 years actually, that Washington State is buying a ferry from out of state. But that's been a problem for this shipyard, Eastern Shipbuilding. They were hit by a hurricane in 2018, and the ferries they were building at that time for Staten Island were delivered late because of the significant damage the shipyard received.
And from what I understand from your reporting, this gives them some leeway in costs that they may have to pay for being late if there is a hurricane, correct?
That's right. So there are late delivery penalties, because it's really important that we get new ferries in this contract, but those penalties are waived in the case of a hurricane.
Well, do you know how these ferries will be transported to our state from Florida, which is obviously across the country?
Right. Well, they have to go through the Panama Canal, and WashDOT is concerned about just setting them out, because they're not designed to go over oceans. None of our Washington State ferries are. So either they'll be loaded on an even bigger ship and just carted like an oil rig would be transferred around the world, which will be quite expensive, or they might get some extra steel around the bow to keep the waves out of the car deck and go under their own power. That's not quite decided yet, and the Coast Guard will have a say.
So finally, I think it's important to ask, so many people in our state use the ferry. This is often impacting hundreds of thousands in our area. How are people feeling, and has the governor or state officials responded to your reporting and some of these concerns?
Well, we asked the governor's office and the ferry leadership about this, and they said they made an intentional choice knowing that it would take a year longer, but it just was not a question to go with the potentially shorter timeline with a much more expensive local bid, because the state just doesn't have that extra money lying around that might involve getting one fewer ferry down the road. I imagine, though, there will be more grousing as this goes out, particularly because, we have to nurse along an aging fleet for an extra year at this point, and it's already trouble right now.
Well, Tom, thank you for your time and thank you for your reporting. We appreciate you coming on to Washington News Wrap.
My pleasure.
Well, Washington State Ferries will hold 2 virtual town hall meetings on Tuesday to update the public on ferry development, electrification plans, terminal construction, and more. The meetings will be held at 1 and 6 p.m. You have to register ahead of time for the meeting, so just visit the link on your screen.